Right, well, we have plenty of variety in our program at the Daiwa Foundation. And one thing we do quite like to do is showcase the achievements of some of our Daiwa scholars. So the other day we had Kathleen Riley, who has designed a new knife. I don't know if some of you were here for that. And today we've got Ben Outram, a Daiwa scholar who has designed something rather more complicated than a knife. I think I haven't yet experienced it, but we're going to find out all about it. So Ben got a Daiwa Scholarship in 2013, so that involves being sent to Japan for a year and a half and being trained intensively in Japanese language, and then doing a homestay somewhere in the countryside. I can't remember where you went, Ben. Kagoshima, great. Oh, I'd love to go there. I've never been, actually. And then a 6-month work placement. And then Ben stayed on after that and did a JSPS postdoc in virtual reality and media technology. And then he came back here to the UK in 2017 and worked in the VR industry and has now founded his own VR game studio. And we are getting a sneak preview, I think, of what he's been up to. So Ben is going to give us a talk for, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes about what he's been doing. And we'll then have Q&A, but downstairs we've got 4 virtual reality units, and the idea is that perhaps we can have a go at this game of his. But anyway, that's the end of my introduction, so over to you, Ben.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you all for coming all this way to come and see this talk. It's nice to see so many faces. Yeah, so as Jason introduced me very well, so I won't repeat that, but yeah, I was part of the DS13 cohort of the Daiwa Scholarship. And so in this presentation, I want to talk a bit about my journey up until then, through that time a bit. I'll try not to bore you too much. But how that influenced the direction of my life and ultimately culminated in probably the most exciting event of my professional life, which will happen next month. So I'll talk about that as well. So yeah, I'm from a town called Malvern in the West Midlands, and I went and studied physics at Manchester University. And after that, did a PhD at Oxford, where I studied liquid crystal display technology. And that involved spending an awful lot of time in a dark room with an optical table like this and making ad hoc devices like this. And so I did, a lot of science research. It was a very fruitful time of my life, and this was probably the biggest amazing thing that I did during my PhD, which was a patent for a type of liquid crystal display technology, which can switch between transmissive modes that you might use in your phone, like in the dark, and reflective modes, like a Kindle, for example, that might work better in the sunshine. Though pretty much all of my work from my PhD is now fairly obsolete with the advent of bright OLED technologies. But already, as you can see here, liquid crystal science and science in general, I think, is very beautiful. It's extremely pretty, and that was something that really fascinated me, specifically about liquid crystals, because liquid crystals down a microscope, and this is an image I've taken down a microscope at the labs in Oxford. They're extremely beautiful, right? And they have these wonderful textures. And so I did an awful lot of photography. And that really was the thing that captured my imagination the most, this crossover between science and technology and art and the sort of wonderful phantasmagorical visuals that you see on a day-to-day basis looking down the microscope. I mean, most of these pictures are taken not of devices that are actually useful, but just when you understand liquid crystals, you can prod them into different structures and mess around with them, melt them. You understand different phases of liquid crystals, and you can create and engineer these sort of beautiful compositions of liquid crystals. And I'll talk a bit more about those later. So there's an awful lot of those. But one thing that I mean, they're beautiful in their own right, but what's more beautiful is when you understand the science and physics behind them. And if you think about a liquid crystal display, which is the main commercial use of liquid crystals, essentially a liquid crystal display is a system to fool humans into thinking they're seeing something that is actually not there. Because at the end of the day, you're just looking at a black mirror of plastic, but it fools your senses. And likewise, when you're looking down a microscope at a liquid crystal, it's to do with the physics and the optics of that liquid crystal as to what the white light that's going through the microscope, what color you see coming through. Like you see all these wonderful colors. And those colors represent a spectrum of light. But the question is how you get from a spectrum of light to a color, and that's a very important thing to understand. And the answer to that is that in our human eyes, we have these three different types of color, of light-sensitive retinal cells, which are sensitive to different parts of the visible spectrum, which give us our sense of multidimensional color. We've got three primary colors, right? So you've got this graph shows you the sensitivity of the three types of cells in your eye to different wavelengths in the visible spectrum. So you've got sort of the blue one at the shorter wavelengths, which is blue light, the red one in the longer wavelengths, the red light, and green is somewhere in the middle. And then if you've ever wondered why the rainbow, why violet looks a bit more red than blue, it starts to go red again, at least for some people. The reason for that is because if you see this red bump that also exists in the short part of the spectrum, in the blue part. And so light that's very at the end of the blue part stimulates your red receptor slightly as well and gives you this sense of violet color. And I was interested in, we used algorithms to determine from a particular spectrum of light that the liquid crystal produces, what color would it look like, right? And you multiply the spectrum by these tristimulus curves, and then you can derive RGB values and try and figure out what color it should look like. And I thought, well, if you take sound spectrum and you pretend that's a spectrum of light and you put it through the same algorithm, what would the sound look like if it were actually a light? And so I did an algorithm to do that. And this is, if you put music through that and look at the spectrum of music, you get these beautiful pictures of, is essentially a spectra of the music as if it were light. And you can get different kind of structures. And the reason I bring this up is because it comes up very much, it comes up recurrently in my work. This guy, Ollie, is a friend of mine who I did physics with in Manchester, who was visiting me in the Oxford lab there, who was very influential in the kind of decisions I took, the creative decisions I took. I'm a bit of an avid juggler. Haven't got my juggling balls to show you at the moment. But I was also interested in, what could we create a video game that interacts with your juggling, a bit like Dance Revolution or something like that. And I told my friend Ollie this idea, and he just said, let's do it. And it was one of those light moments when you think, you know what, sometimes you just need to be told, let's do it, and then just create it. And so we started doing this with the Nintendo Wii, which this Nintendo Wiimote is used to track for the Nintendo Wii, but it also happens to be a very cheap camera that can track infrared sources. So you can create an infrared illuminator, shine it at some retroreflective juggling balls, which you just stick some retroreflective tape on them, and then you can use that to track the juggling patterns and create all these pretty patterns. So, that was sort of the PhD times and really starting in this journey of using technology and science to create art and computer-human interaction type things. Now that brings me to the Daiwa Scholarship. So this was my cohort of students. After my PhD, I didn't know what I wanted to, well, I wanted to go to Japan, and there was this wonderful scholarship opportunity. And these are the 6 of us who went to Naganuma School. And yeah, learning Japanese was a very interesting experience. I think no Daiwa Scholar talk would be complete without showing you a few pictures from Japan and some of my favorite things. So I'm going to bore you a little bit with, if anyone knows this view. Do you know this view?
Yes.
From Starbucks in Shibuya, looking out at the famous crossing in the rain specifically is my favorite time, because you have hundreds of people with their umbrellas crossing, and it's very fun to watch as you sip your coffee. Japanese food, of course. Izakayas, where you can drink and eat to your heart's content. This izakaya is in Shimokitazawa. It's called Shirube. And at least when I was a scholar, there was this tradition that your senpai, the year above you on the scholarship, would take you to this restaurant and initiate you into the izakaya nomi hodai culture, which means all you can drink culture. So you're drinking sort of sake out of bamboo, and you're getting umeshu soda, and yeah, I think anyone that's been to Japan will appreciate some of these photos, I hope. This is another Daiwa scholar who was my kohai, in fact, Ola, who I became very good friends with. And this is another izakaya called, I think it's Nikucho. I could be wrong with that. Didn't look it up before coming here, in Shibuya. And it's a great big food hall, and they serve everything from raw chicken to raw horse. So you can you can experience that. Nighttime Tokyo from height. This picture I took with the best iPhone at the time, the iPhone 4, I think, or 5, from the Sky Tower. And so, you know, Tokyo is just this vast, humongous, huge city. And of course, sumo wrestling, sakura blossoms. In fact, I wrote a haiku as my final lesson in Naganuma, and the haiku went, I'll tell you at the end. This is my favorite day in Tokyo, which is Halloween in Tokyo. I think it became a bit infamous a couple of years after I left, but at least at the time, everyone would dress up, and you'd have hundreds and thousands of people flooding Shibuya's streets with their own costumes that they've bought or that they've made. And it was always my favorite. I went every year. It's absolute mayhem, and everyone's very photogenic and having a great time. Also went here. Can you tell me where this is? Do you Kawasaki? I can't actually remember, but yeah, that was something I did. Climbing Mount Fuji, and I kind of realized when Nintendo got some of the inspiration for some of the levels in Super Mario World, which I enjoyed so much as a kid, going up Mount Fuji and watching the sunrise there. It was a very magical experience. And that kind of took us to the end of this year of learning Japanese, where and the next part of the scholarship, as Jason mentioned, is you go on a month homestay, and the location that I decided to go to was in Kyushu. I wanted to go to the end of Japan and see how different it gets. Is it like going to the north of Scotland? And I found out, yes, it is a bit like that. They have a very strong accent, very strong dialect, very strong culture. And I went to a place called Kagoshima, and I think it was called Koyasan. No, I can't remember now. Where did I go? I can't remember. Anyway, this volcano is called Sakurajima, and it's visible from pretty much everywhere if you go to Kagoshima. And it constantly spews out a lot of soot, which means that everyone has to wash their cars constantly because they're being covered in soot. It's a place that's very prone to the forces of nature in general. And while I was there, there was a typhoon, a very strong one actually, that came through. And I helped my homestay family to secure their garden furniture while it went through. Now my homestay, I kind of went there, thinking I was going to have a great time, and I did in the end. But as soon as I got out the car, or got in the car and met my homestay host, and I introduced myself in the best Japanese I knew at the time, he interrupted me and said, "No, please, I would like you to speak English to me, because the whole point is that I'm having you is that I can practice my English." And I said, and I kind of, my heart really sank at that point, and I had to. They were like, no, off you go. You're meant to be studying Japanese, aren't you? Go to the library every day. So I was commuting to the library to study Japanese, which I really didn't want to do, and because I was in this whole new place, and so after a few days of this, I kind of broke down. I was like, no, I'm not doing this, and I went on couch surfing, and found a local a JET program person. Now the JET program is a program, I don't know if it still runs, does it? I guess it does. And they take students, and then after they finish university usually, and they go and teach English or be an English teaching assistant. But they generally spread them all over Japan, in rural places. They don't give them any Japanese training. And so they're generally quite lonely, and they're in these fantastical places. So as soon as you hook into one, then they're very happy to introduce you, because they know all each other, and they don't see very many people come through. So I just ended up leaving my homestay family, unfortunately, and hopping around the different sofas of these JET program people and exploring the Kyushu, and it had a lot to offer, from amazing wildlife and starfish. I got connected with this couple who were on their second marriage, and they owned and ran this ramen shop, and they were extremely happy to take me in for a few days, and I spent the whole time speaking Japanese with them. That was great. They drank a lot of shochu at night after they finished their work, like everybody in that region, and this is the kind of ramen they made. It was sort of chashu ramen with their own. They made their own soup from scratch, and they made all their noodles as well from scratch, which is quite a little bit more unusual. And they were extremely popular in the village. There was always a huge queue to go in, and of course they gave me the hero's massive unfinishable ramen while I stayed there, which was very good. Another thing you can do if you do go to that area of Japan, at the southern tip is a town called Ibuski, or is it a region called Ibuski? I can't remember. I look at Jason like it. He should be the expert in Japanese geography. I don't know, but yeah, you can do this, which is it's like an onsen, but it's a sand onsen with this volcanic sand, which is just perpetually hot because of the geothermal activity, and you get buried in sand for a while. I also went to this island here, Yakushima, where you can get a boat from Ibuski to Yakushima. It's famous for being the inspiration and sort of birthplace of the set for Princess Mononoke, the Studio Ghibli movie, if people are familiar with that. And it really does live up to its beautiful, the hype of it, how beautiful it is, with these ancient trees with the moss and the birds and the trees. So I spent a lovely time hiking there and meeting some of the slightly bizarre locals who cooked me. This lady cooked me this, which tabeuo, which for those that you don't know, it's a flying fish, and it's quite famous in that area. One of the guys I stayed with on the island, a couch surfer, he had a boat, and he would go around and spend weeks and weeks on the boat, and he would eat primarily these. They would just fly into his boat, he said sometimes. So that's quite interesting. So that kind of took me up to the end of this homestay month. A wonderful time. I did end up, in the end, speaking an awful lot of Japanese. Didn't learn that many kanji, and ended up failing my N2. But it did give me a lot of time to reflect on life and what I wanted to do. You know, when I first went to Japan, I thought I would be doing liquid crystal display science, working. I looked up loads of the professors there and the research, and I convinced Daiwa that it was one of the main places for liquid crystal science, which is partial truth, and got into the Daiwa Scholarship on that merit, because I was doing liquid crystal engineering, and you know, I wanted to, and I did end up visiting a few liquid crystal labs. But while I was there, you know, I was doing all this creative technology stuff in my free time, and I was also influenced by the art scene in Japan. So, you know, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Team Lab. They sometimes exhibit in London as well, and they create these amazing immersive experiences, often involving quite a lot of interactivity with bubbles and water and different types of things. This looks like their most recent exhibition I just took from their website, but these were a couple of pictures I took while I was at exhibitions in Tokyo. And I thought, you know, while I'm in Japan, you know, it's an opportunity because I like to do this kind of thing, and Japanese people like to do this thing, and they come up with the most crazy ideas, which we'll see a few more later. So I thought, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a media lab instead of a liquid crystal lab, and it's only 6 months. I can do whatever I like, and then I can always go back to the liquid crystal stuff later. And of course, that never happened. But I joined Keio University's Keio Media Design, and specifically the embodied media project, which was related to robotics, and their labs were in the Miraikan, which, if you're not familiar, is located in Odaiba, which is a sort of man-made island off the eastern side of Tokyo, across the bay. It's very famous for this Gundam statue, which is no longer actually there, but sort of overlooks the island, and the Miraikan, which is essentially a museum. It's called Miraikan, which kind of means future building, and it contains a museum dedicated to the future and dedicated to technology. And they have labs in the top, which contain some of the stuff that the Keio Media Design Embodied Media Lab was doing. This Charith was a guy who worked on what they're most famous for, which is these telexistence robots. So they involve robots where you can beam into them using virtual reality and haptic devices, and then as you move, then the robot moves in the remote location. So you can have the experience of being tele-existent and play chess with someone who's across the world somewhere, which is one thing that they tried, or give someone a haircut, which is another thing they tried. They come up with a lot of crazy ideas there. A lot to do with robotics, not just robotics, also sports and user design and different types of things. This was a mind-controlled articulated tail that I was trying out. I wasn't involved with that, but I started the 6-month period. And that 6-month internship really was great. I mean, it gave me this amazing experience of working in a Japanese team, in a Japanese lab, in a different field. And I started to work in this lab. I think, that's where I was sitting, probably. I started working on this concept, which brought back a bit of the juggling stuff and was a bit more tuned to what they were doing in that lab. So they're big into the haptic technology. They had a haptic suit, which we'll see later, haptic gloves, all sorts of things to do with haptics. So I was interested. Most of the haptics are like vibrational, like your phone. Like when your phone vibrates, that's what you call a haptic response, which tells you you've got a text message. But there weren't many devices which simulate force, right? So, I was interested if you're juggling balls in virtual reality. Obviously, the balls in virtual reality don't have any weight because they're virtual. But if you could have a string on your hand that pulls downwards with the force that the ball should have on your hand, then you can sort of simulate the weights of juggling balls. So that was the concept. And I ended up learning a bit of electronics and Arduino and doing some different things. And this was the result. This would never work in a real product, and I learned a lot about control theory and things, but essentially you've got a motor with a string on it, and the motor pulls down to apply the force, and the force is measured by a balance, and so then there's a control system to try and simulate the force that the ball has in your virtual reality thing. So I also continue to do other kind of interesting tech projects. This does have a video in it, but I don't know if that's going to work. That's fine. We'll move on. But that sound visualization thing that I did in Oxford, I then also, during my time in Keio Media Design, and from talking to a lot of people, kind of expanded that concept into some iPhone apps. And this one on the left allows you to paint with the color of the music that you're listening to, which is kind of an interesting idea. You can still download that app if you're interested to try it. But yeah, I mean, it was this kind of media lab really allows you to do whatever you like, and no idea is too crazy. I saw some really crazy ideas. One of them here was a game that they developed using a leaf blower, where you have to blow the red balloons into your opponent's court, and then the winner is the one who has the least balloons in their court at the end. They also invented this. It's like a high-tech version of sumo wrestling, where you, and I don't know if this video is gonna, I can actually play. Here we go. Let's play this little clip. You can see what it's like. So they were very keen to get me into it, and the that's me winning, by the way. And we even appeared on national television once or twice as well. So this was my team at Keio Media Design. Minamizawa Sensei was my supervisor, and a lot of the team appearing here. That looks like we are, I don't know where we are, but yeah. So it was at that time that I finished the Daiwa Scholarship essentially, and I didn't know what I wanted to do next. Was I going to come back to the UK? I actually thought, no, I want to stay in Japan longer, because I've come here, I've learned Japanese, and it'd be stupid to go home now, because all that effort isn't going to get used. So I thought I'll stay, and I did actually apply to TeamLab as an option. Had an interview there, which was that art installation company as mentioned earlier. But in the end, I chose to go for the JSPS Fellowship for the postdoc and to continue at Keio Media Design, and continue doing what I love to do. And it was during the JSPS, right at the beginning, I kind of started getting into the virtual reality. This is the Oculus Development Kit 2, and it was the first sort of commercially available 6 degrees of freedom for tracking virtual reality headset. It wasn't a consumer product, but it was something that you could buy and you could create virtual reality experiences with. And during 2016, 2017 was a real heyday of experimentation, with every sort of geek at home playing around with virtual reality to do interesting and novel things. And the first thing that I did with it under the JSPS Fellowship was to explore the concept of immersion and presence in virtual reality, which is, presence is defined as the sense that you are somewhere rather than just seeing pictures. And I was interested in whether you could get an increased sense of presence through connecting different senses together. And I did this experiment, which was a massive failure, but still got to present it at the IEEE VR in the US with the team, which was exciting. And we did a series of different kinds of interesting tech projects. As you probably know, the Apple Vision Pro is compatible with eye tracking. It's got eye tracking sensors in there. But I like to think that we were some of the first to actually stick eye trackers into a VR headset. So this involves dismantling it, chopping off part of the lens to make room for this, which is an infrared camera, which you can then use to track your eyes. And we use that to create new types of interaction modality, ways to interact with computers, with VR environments, with different ways to navigate in VR, those kind of things. And you know, my supervisor basically didn't mind at all what I did. I could have not even turned up, and he probably wouldn't have minded. I guess I'd brought my own funding, but it did give me a lot of freedom to do, you know, stuff that was more artistic than scientific. But I really realized that the the whole lab was, I mean, they ostensibly do science and technology, but really what they're doing is creating really cool, talkable, artistic stuff and designing new kinds of ideas for computer-human interaction. And so I started collaborating more closely with my colleagues. In particular, they had this full-body haptic vibrations suit, which I'll show you later, and they wanted me to develop content for that. So I created this VR experience which used the same algorithm that created that sound visualization, but then projected into geometries in virtual reality. And we took that and other experiences to Dubai, where we exhibited a range of different things as part of that. This is that full-body haptic vibration suit. It has 26 very powerful vibrating actuators, and they're strapped to pretty much every part of your body. And then the game content works through the haptic vibrations as well, which is quite interesting. And it was a sort of period of time where we were doing lots of crazy stuff like this and taking it to lots of crazy places like Tokyo Game Show and SIGGRAPH in California, and yeah, lots of places. Now this suit, it was made as a collaboration between Keio Media Design and a gaming company called Enhanced Games. And Enhanced Games are a Japanese gaming company headed by this guy, Tetsuya Mizuguchi, and he is sort of like a legendary game designer who it was a childhood hero of mine. When I was 14, his biggest game called Res came out on the Dreamcast and PlayStation 2, and I played that game as a 14-year-old to death, and I kept playing it throughout my life. And I didn't actually know he was involved with Keio Media Design until I got there, really. And so it was quite interesting to just meet a childhood hero like that. Absolutely incredible. And this is the game he's famous for, Res, which I guess you'll appreciate has some of the aesthetic, the kind of aesthetics that I particularly dear to me. I'm just a huge fan of this kind of very psychedelic visual kind of experience. And being part of that lab and working with the haptic suit, I was able to sort of try the game when they released it finally in virtual reality before it was released, which I thought was very exciting. And you'll be able to play Squingle later before it's released as well, which is I hope you find exciting. And of course, we did things like sticky EEG machines on people's heads while they were playing the game in the suit, and to try and see, you know, how it affects the brain states and things like that. The answer is that this kind of a setup is not good enough to do any real useful EEG measurement. So there was no conclusive evidence, anything from that work. But it was still fascinating, and that was what this lab was really great at. It's just really pushing the boundaries, no ideas too crazy. And working with Tetsuya Mizuguchi's team with the haptic suit, I worked on this, which was, I think, the favorite thing that I did while I was there. It was, again, a virtual reality music visualizer, essentially, that was a collaboration with one of my favorite electronic music artists called Ott, who provided the music, which I visualized into this virtual reality space. And we took it to new frontiers along with Res, the game Res. And this was kind of like what it was a bit like. This is the curator for the New Frontiers section, which looks at new technologies um, at Sundance Film Festival. So that was quite fun to go there and experience, you know, exhibiting with some of the my childhood heroes and Res Infinite as well, which was really quite an experience. So the next project I worked on there was, again, to do with the juggling. I recreated what I'd done in Oxford with the Wiimote to track the juggling balls. And I was interested to do something with virtual reality like that. And but then upgraded. They had a sort of really high-tech motion tracking system. So I ended up using their motion tracking system and created this experience called Neutrino, where basically there's these balls. It kind of teaches you different juggling moves. I took the motion tracking data from juggling, and then I used that to create a sort of looping juggling simulation where you have to catch the balls, and so you learn how to sort of do it a little bit. And it was quite interesting. We took it to the next Dubai International Film Festival, where we got invited back again and got lots of people to play it. Yeah, so it was quite successful. I think you can still download it from my website and play it if you're interested. Now I won't labour it too much, but ended up doing a lot of other things, like this was a method for locomoting around a virtual environment, but instead of just walking around, you use a sort of orbital technique. So as you rotate your head, you actually, instead of just rotating your head like this, you actually orbit around the object as well, a bit like in a CAD software or 3D software. And then we used eye tracking to control like what the point of interest that you're orbiting around. We did tons of random stuff like this. And in the end, at the end of the postdoc, I realized that I'd done, in collaboration with the Japanese teams there, we managed to publish around 13 or 14 peer-reviewed articles. So I was very pleased with the level of collaboration that really enabled. And as part of the JSPS Scholarship, they encourage you to go to a school and give a talk, which I did. I don't know if I can press. No, probably for the best because my bad Japanese, but I did give the lecture in Japanese to this high school class of students in Nara, and it was really fantastic. I basically told the students I showed them lots of trippy pictures like I've been showing you, and I told them, if you want to learn how to do this stuff, don't rely on the Japanese education. You should go and learn all of this stuff yourself, go on YouTube, those kind of things. I'm not sure what the teachers thought of me saying that, but I think it was a great thing to do. Yeah, so I realize it's a bit of a life story, and I apologize, but it's kind of important as sort of the foundations. You see all of the influences that I've had in Japan and throughout this period in what I'm doing now. So that's why I'm taking you on this journey. When I came back to the UK, I finished off a book related to the liquid crystal stuff, and so I did a big photography project where I went back to my old labs, was able to reconvene with some of my old friends in the liquid crystal display academia, and did this photography project for this book. And the book is available. You can get it on Amazon. It's like talks you through the science of what you're seeing in the images. So by the time you've read the book, not only will you have seen lots of nice images, but you will get a feel for the science and physics behind it. And then I also I sort of faffed around for quite a bit when I got back to the UK. I think it's something a lot of people experience when they spend 4 years in Japan and then they leave. You get this sort of sense of loss, a bit of grief. You don't really know what to do with your life. So I've sort of messed around with some machine learning algorithms and creating even more juggling VR experiences, and doing a sort of liquid crystal video project with Max Cooper, who's another electronic artist. And at some point I kind of ran out of money and was like, okay, I should probably do something serious now. I've been playing in Tokyo and playing around with science and physics and all this arty stuff. Maybe I should just get a proper job. So I moved to London and joined Shell. And the first thing Shell said to me as a VR consultant at Shell was, do you know that film Avatar? Well, you know that thing where they have this 3D display and they're all collaborating and they're looking for unobtainium and the substrata of the ground. And I said, yeah, I know that, yeah. And they said, well, we want that, so we can look for oil underground with the thing. And I said, well, you mean, you know, that film about the blue people who live in this idyllic utopian society in an untouched, pristine wilderness of beautiful nature, and where it's, and this is the Shell guys that with smoking a cigar going to disrupt and sort of destroy the pristine environment. And they were like, yeah, that's exactly what we want. So I was like, okay, so this was my attempt at doing something like that. This is looking at some synthetic substrata data through an experimental augmented reality headset that I did a long time ago for Shell. But luckily, the pandemic came and all my projects got cancelled, so I didn't have any work, and that's my favorite way to be, because then I can start working on my own stuff again. So I kind of took the opportunity. They were always like sort of like a carrot saying, you know, oh, we'll have work for you in a couple of months, a few months, just wait. So I just spent the time working on a solo project, which I built some prototypes and done some testing, and a lot of people really enjoyed it. So I just carried on working on it, and eventually it has turned into a big business. But there's been an awful lot of learnings along the way. Squingle is a puzzle game, a virtual reality and mixed reality puzzle game, and I will play you the video. So yeah, this game is, let's see if I can skip. So Squingle is kind of a VR puzzle game. You have to guide revolving orbs through a series of increasingly complex 3D puzzles while being taken on a story of transcendence by a mystical goddess character, and you'll get to try it later. But yeah, it sort of takes inspiration a lot from the aesthetic of liquid crystals, a lot of the physics of how the light works in liquid crystals. Their iridescence, for example, is used in the game. A lot of liquid crystal textures are used to texture the objects in the game. And all of the colors in the game are sampled from some of those liquid crystal photos that you saw earlier. The mechanic of the rotating balls and the topology of the mazes is an attempt to sort of simplify juggling, and I built those two juggling experiences in VR, right? But the problem with those is that they're just too difficult. Juggling is a difficult thing to learn. It's very difficult to control the learning curve to make it an accessible experience. So this game tries to simplify it. So instead of having 3 balls, you have just 2 balls. And rather than trying to make them move yourself, they rotate automatically. And the topology of what you're doing isn't played out through time, temporally, but it's played out through space, through the design of the levels. And so it kind of tries to give that joy that you get from juggling and flow toys and fun things like that, and brings that into a more accessible form through the medium of virtual reality, with a very strong focus on the haptics and the visual design and the user experience. So yeah, it's been doing really well. The pre-release got rated pretty highly by the media, and we had lots of users coming back with saying wonderful things about the game, and it brought me to different places. I've taken it to many expos and festivals and things like that. And this one in particular, EGX, which is in London, that's where I met this Japanese publishing company. So this Japanese publishing company, My Dearest, they're a Japan-only VR company, and they publish a lot of games, mostly like Japanese RPG, story-based kind of anime-style games. But they just kind of saw Squingle, and they thought that it would be really appropriate for a Japanese audience. So they helped me to localize the game to Japanese and then market it, and ended up getting featured in the Famitsu magazine, which is Japan's premier video games news website and weekly magazine. So that was really quite something that, having read Famitsu as a kid, I was really, really pleased with that kind of exposure. And it was also the opportunity that allowed me to really do further business development and get further funding and take it to other places like Gamescom, where I developed more of a relationship with Meta, got some funding from them, and then have now on this road towards launching the game, which I'm very excited for. So I was literally about to launch it in the summer, and a late investor from the US came in, and they wanted to put some additional money and marketing into the game and help refine the game. So in line with also the direction that Meta themselves are taking with the virtual reality industry, which is very much towards these kind of mixed reality experiences. And a mixed reality experience is one where you can see the world outside of yourself, as well as the virtual content. And if you try later, you'll be able to experience that. So yeah, the game is coming out in November, and there's a demo version coming out in October, and you are going to get hopefully a preview to try the game. So thank you very much for your time. I hope that wasn't too arduous, and I'd love to connect with any and all of you if you want to scan the QR code for LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to talk to you in the reception afterwards.